Imagine a cat, right? But not just any cat, a spy cat.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe a bird carrying a tiny camera. Sounds like something straight out of, I don't know, a spy thriller. Maybe even a cartoon.
It does sound pretty far-fetched, doesn't it? Like almost unbelievable.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a truly remarkable document. It's a formal letter from the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA,
Right.
and it offers this surprising glimpse into what might be one of the most unusual and, frankly, audacious intelligence projects ever conceived, or at least heavily rumored about.
Yeah, or at least asked about very seriously.
Exactly. This isn't just about, strange concepts in the abstract. It's about seeing how real people tried to uncover secret information and how the government actually responded to that relentless quest for transparency.
And what's really illuminating here, I think, is that this single letter, and it looks pretty dry on the surface, bureaucratic,
Hmm.
it indirectly confirms this intense curiosity.
Yep.
And maybe even the actual existence, or at least serious consideration, of some truly imaginative, if profoundly unconventional attempts at animal espionage.
So it's not quite a smoking gun saying, yes, we had spy cats.
No, not a confirmation of success or even failure, really. But it's an undeniable acknowledgement that someone lodged a serious, formal inquiry into these kinds of clandestine projects.
Okay.
And that tells us these aren't just, random urban legends floating around. They were questions worth formally asking a highly secreted agency like the CIA.
So our mission today is to thoroughly explore this specific Freedom of Information Act request, FOIA, right?
Right,
And the
yeah.
CIA's official response to it.
Exactly.
We're going to peel back the layers, try to understand the specific details of what was being asked, how the CIA handled it, and, what does it all imply about the often kind of surreal history of intelligence gathering.
Right. This document, even though it seems just bureaucratic, it acts like a critical piece of evidence, like an archaeological dig into secret history.
Yeah.
It proves that even the inquiries, maybe the failures, maybe just the ideas, are important records worth looking at.
Okay, so our entire deep dive today revolves around this one letter, dated August 23, 2002.
Right.
And this isn't some fictional memo from a spy novel. This is a real-world document originating from the Central Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
It's actually signed by Catherine the Steyer, who was the information and privacy coordinator for the CIA back then.
Okay, so an official capacity.
Yeah, just knowing it's a genuine CIA letter immediately ramps up the intrigue, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this document, it's a formal response to a Freedom of Information Act request. Now, FOIA, as you probably know, is the public's key tool for legally prying information from government agencies.
Right, passed back in '66.
That's the one. It grants you, the public, the statutory right to request access to records from any federal agency. And this letter is FOIA in action.
You could see it working.
Exactly. It's a tangible demonstration of how a civilian can legally push for answers the government might prefer to keep hidden. It really underscores that principle that government records, with certain exceptions, of course, national security, privacy should be accessible.
Yeah.
The very fact that this response exists tells us that Professor Albert's inquiry wasn't just, easily brushed off.
And who is the recipient? This person bold enough to ask the CIA about, well, spy animals.
Right. It was a Professor James A. Albert from Drake University Law School in Des Moines, Iowa.
Ah, okay. A law professor.
Exactly. So this wasn't just a casual email from some curious citizen. This was a serious, detailed request from an academic, a law professor no less.
Right.
Which indicates a deep, probably research-driven interest.
Yeah, and a law professor's involvement immediately suggests they probably know the ins and outs of FOIA itself, right? How it works, how to frame a request to get the best chance of a response.
Absolutely. He was clearly looking for something very specific and probably had a strong suspicion that, some relevant records might actually exist somewhere in the CIA's huge archives.
And the letter has this reference number, F-2002-01252. What does that tell us?
Well, that indicates the CIA's internal tracking for this specific request. And it's much more than just a number. It highlights the formal processing within the agency's system.
Okay.
A system designed to manage, potentially thousands of these inquiries every year. It tells us this request wasn't just glanced at and tossed aside.
It got logged.
It got logged, categorized,
Yeah.
entered into a formal system that ensures a response, however delayed that response might be. This number is like its unique ID, letting both the requester and the agency track it through what can be a really complex and long review process.
So it signals that this request, as weird as the topic sounds, was treated seriously, with full bureaucratic weight.
Precisely. Just like any other FOIA submission.
But, okay, the letter itself is formal, bureaucratic. But the subject matter, Professor Albert was chasing. This is where it gets really speculative, maybe even a bit bizarre, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
The first, and probably the most famous part of his request centered on the project, apparently undertaken during 1960s, Yeah.
in
which cats were implanted with eavesdropping devices, commonly referred to as Acoustic Kitty.
Mm-hmm. Acoustic Kitty.
Just hearing Acoustic Kitty immediately makes you picture, like, secret missions and ingenious, if maybe totally bonkers, spy tactics.
It does. It sounds like something straight out of a comic book or maybe a spoof movie.
Yeah.
But the fact that Acoustic Kitty was already a commonly referred to name back in 2002 when this letter was written, that's incredibly telling, I think.
How so?
Well, it suggests that this project, or at least the persistent rumors about it, already had a known sort of colloquial name. It wasn't just a wild new idea Professor Albert was floating.
Right, it had been around.
Yet something that had been discussed or speculated about before, maybe in intelligence circles or
Yeah.
maybe even publicly through like leaks or earlier declassified bits over the years.
Okay.
The existence of that common name gives it a certain weight, a legendary status.
Yeah.
It suggests it wasn't just a fleeting concept, but something that had captured people's imagination or had some basis in reality, even if it was all shrouded in secrecy. It kind of validates the awareness of the whole idea.
Okay, beyond the kind of fantastical image, let's ground this for a second. The sheer technical audacity of implanting eavesdropping devices into a living cat back in the 1960s?
Yeah.
I mean, how on earth would that actually work? We're not talking about microchips like today, are we?
No way.
Yeah.
You're talking much cruder, probably bulkier stuff. Miniaturization was really just starting then.
So what? Early transistors? Maybe a tiny reel-to-reel recorder? Miniature batteries?
Possibly.
Hmm.
Imagine the size of a device that could effectively record audio and transmit it from inside a cat, and the power source needed to keep it going for any useful amount of time.
Wow. And where do you even put it? In the chest cavity? Some kind of surgically implanted harness?
These are the huge questions, right? And it raises immense issues about the cat's health, its mobility, and frankly, its willingness to just go spy for you.
Yeah, cats aren't exactly known for following orders.
That's precisely where the practical side just hits a wall, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, leave aside the ethical questions about animal welfare for a moment.
Which are huge.
Huge. But the engineering challenges alone would have been monumental.
Okay.
You'd need a microphone sensitive enough to pick up conversations,
Right.
but not so sensitive it just picks up the cat's own purring or breathing or heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need a transmitter,
Yeah.
which needs an antenna. Where do you hide that on a cat without making it totally obvious?
Yeah, a little aerial sticking out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the power source for all this? Battery technology back then was, well, primitive compared to now.
Right.
A device that could run for hours, let alone days, without needing a recharge, while being small enough to fit inside a cat and not mess up its movement or health.
Yeah.
That would have been a technological miracle for the time.
And even if you somehow solved all that?
The fundamental problem is still there. A cat is an animal. It's notoriously independent.
Right.
How do you direct it to a specific spot to eavesdrop? Would it even sit still long enough? Would it come back? The questions just keep multiplying.
So basically, they were trying to turn this creature known for supreme independence into a reliable intelligence asset.
Pretty much.
I'm just picturing some, 1960s CIA training film trying to get a cat to sit, stay, don't paw at the wire. And for the love of secrets, stay on target.
You're probably not far off. I mean, the humor looking back kind of masks the serious intent, though. This wasn't just a joke. We know from other sources this was apparently a multi-million-dollar program. And that makes the sheer audacity even more profound. It highlights the very real, sometimes almost absurd lengths intelligence agencies might consider going to when, traditional methods aren't working or when some unconventional approach seems to offer a unique advantage.
Especially during the Cold War.
Exactly. It speaks to that period of intense innovation, experimentation, where maybe no idea seemed too outlandish to explore if it offered a perceived edge against the Soviets. It really underscores a leave no stone unturned approach to intelligence gathering.
But Professor Albert's curiosity and his FOIA request, it didn't just stop with Acoustic Kitty, did it?
No, not at all. His request was way more comprehensive. It extended the scope to other animals and the entire life cycle of potential projects.
So he wasn't just chasing one sensational rumor. He was looking for a pattern, a program.
I think so. That broader scope is quite revealing. If you connect it to the bigger picture, it suggests Professor Albert suspected that Acoustic Kitty might not have been just a one-off, but maybe part of a larger, perhaps more sustained effort to leverage animal capabilities for covert ops. It moves beyond the headline to probe the sort of underlying operational philosophy of animal spying.
Okay.
His request clearly indicates a belief that if one project like this existed, maybe others did too, or were at least seriously considered.
And the level of detail he asked for is pretty amazing, almost like he knew what kind of documents might be lurking in the files.
It really is.
He started by asking for any projects involving implanting eavesdropping devices in cats or dogs.
Right, broadening it immediately.
Which suggests he thought there might have been other, maybe unnamed initiatives. Or variations. Maybe even ones that failed so badly they never got a catchy nickname, like Acoustic Kitty.
Could be. It implies a potential program, not just one isolated experiment.
Then he didn't just ask about the implants, but for the testing of those animals.
Yeah, that's key. That's not about the initial surgery. It implies a systematic approach to evaluating if they were even viable as intelligence assets.
Like controlled trials, metrics for success.
Exactly. Were there controlled trials? How were they done? What did they measure? This suggests a more rigorous scientific approach to assessing if these projects were even feasible. He wanted to understand the operational side, how these animals were evaluated before they were even considered for deployment.
And maybe most tellingly, he requested info on field experiments or field testing when those animals were actually taken outside CIA headquarters.
That's crucial. Absolutely crucial. Moving from the lab, the controlled environment, into the real world, uncontrolled scenarios.
That indicates a serious commitment, right? Resources, planning, a real attempt to make these animal agents operational.
Definitely. This is where the theory meets practice, where the rubber meets the road for a secret project like this. And what kind of logistical nightmare would that have been? Imagine the planning involved.
Seriously, how do you deploy a spy cat or dog in, say, a foreign city without attracting attention?
Right. Do you have handlers disguised as regular people? Is the target a specific building, a conversation on a park bench, or just general intel gathering in an area?
And the risks. What if the animal gets distracted by, I don't know, another cat? Or just runs away?
The ethical tightrope is one thing, but the operational risks would have been immense. His request clearly implies they were seriously considering deploying these assets, not just tinkering in a lab. It pushes the whole concept from just hypothetical into the realm of potential operational reality.
And Professor Albert, he didn't stop there. He dug even deeper. He asked for any information about the laboratory experiments themselves and the tests that were done on such animals.
Yeah, delving into the scientific rigor, or maybe the lack of it.
What kind of data did they collect? What were the test parameters? Did they even track how the implants affected the animal's health or behavior?
He's asking for the empirical foundation of these projects, assuming a solid foundation even existed.
And then he went even further, requesting the procedures that were done on them in implanting those devices. Any laboratory notes or records involving the procedures employed in implanting those devices.
Super specific, highly technical details.
It implies a belief that, that documentation might actually exist, that the implants themselves were complex enough to need detailed procedural records.
Imagine the surgeon's notes for implanting a listening device in a cat.
Right.
That level of detail suggests a very informed inquiry, a clear understanding of the kind of paperwork that gets generated by a serious government-funded research project. It really highlights how thorough he was trying to be.
And finally, kind of rounding out the whole life cycle of these potential projects, he sought any evaluation or memoranda in which the projects involving cats and dogs were evaluated, explained, or in any way referred to.
Ah, the evaluations. That's often the goldmine.
Because that's where you find the internal assessments, successes, failures, official discussions, bureaucratic oversight.
Exactly. This is where you'd find the lessons learned. Was this whole thing worth it? Analysis, and potentially the justification for continuing the project, or more likely maybe for shutting it down.
That would be the real prize for understanding the project's fate, wouldn't it? Its ultimate utility, or maybe futility.
Precisely. This final request is crucial because it aims straight at the strategic thinking behind these programs. Was Acoustic Kitty deemed a success, a failure, just too impractical to continue? What were the official conclusions? Those evaluations are often the most valuable documents for historians, for researchers, because they give you insight into the mindset, the decision-making process of the agency. It's the difference between knowing what happened and understanding why it happened, or maybe why it stopped.
You can really see the sheer depth of inquiry here. It's not just, did this happen? It's, how did it happen? What did you learn? And what were the official conclusions?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive sweep, looking for any and all information related to the operational side, the evaluation side of these animal programs. That level of detail just speaks volumes about Professor Albert's research and his understanding of how clandestine projects might get documented.
And okay, it gets even more fascinating because Professor Albert's request didn't just stick to ground-based mammals, it went airborne. The request asks for information about the use of birds, including hawks and crows, to carry cameras or any other way be useful in eavesdropping or spying. And even specifically mentioning mechanical birds.
Yeah, that's wild. This broadens the whole animal kingdom under consideration for spying, moving from cats and dogs on the ground to aerial observers.
So why birds? What's the thinking there?
Well, think about it. Their natural ability to fly, to survey from above, maybe perch somewhere undetected, that makes them inherently attractive for reconnaissance, doesn't it?
I guess so.
Hawks are birds of prey. They can fly high. They have incredible eyesight. Crows are known for being smart. They adapt well to cities, and they can even mimic sound sometimes. Their natural behaviors could potentially be exploited for surveillance in ways that ground animals just can't match. Imagine a hawk circling high above a target, or a crow sitting on a window ledge. The potential for unobtrusive observation is huge.
And the mechanical birds part, that seems particularly forward-thinking, especially for a request in 2002 looking back at the 1960s.
It really is. It shows a truly visionary approach, maybe. Blending biology with mechanics for surveillance.
Like early drones.
In a sense, yeah. It's like a precursor to modern drone technology, a very early exploration of unmanned aerial vehicles for intelligence gathering. In the 60s, drones as we know them didn't exist, obviously.
Right.
But the concept of small, maybe remotely controlled flying things for reconnaissance, that would have been on the minds of strategists. This request points to an era where the lines between science fiction and operational reality were maybe getting blurry in the minds of intelligence planners.
Where no biological or mechanical solution was off the table if it offered some kind of strategic advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It speaks to this really expansive imagination within intelligence circles, considering every possible avenue.
It truly shows that the human imagination, when it comes to intelligence, is just boundless, exploring every possible avenue, biological, mechanical, whatever, to get an informational edge.
Leveraging natural abilities, then trying to enhance them or mimic them with technology.
Yeah. This section of the request alone reveals this incredibly expansive vision for spying during the Cold War. It wasn't just about big bombs and tanks. It was about the subtle, the covert, the utterly unconventional. Okay, so after crafting this incredibly precise, almost clairvoyant request, Professor Albert sends it off into the bureaucratic ether. Now, for a lot of FOIA requests, especially ones touching on sensitive intelligence stuff, you might expect a quick dismissal, right? A flat, no records, maybe a redirect.
Often, yeah.
But here's where our story takes another interesting turn. The CIA's first move wasn't to deny it. They formally accepted it.
Which is significant.
It's not a dismissal. It's a commitment to actually process the request. That's a big step in the FOIA journey. They're acknowledging that the information requested might actually exist within their records.
And that acceptance signifies the request is legitimate, right? It falls squarely within the scope of info that could potentially be released under FOIA. It means the CIA decided it was a valid request based on the law, deeming it worth an internal search.
And the letter mentions the specific laws.
It does. It states it will be processed in accordance with the FOIA 5 U.S.C. Section 552 as amended, and the CIA Information Act 50 U.S.C. Section 431.
Okay, the CIA Information Act. What's that?
Well, for people familiar with FOIA, including that specific act is a crucial signal. It tells Professor Albert and us that while they acknowledge their general duty under FOIA, they're also reserving the right to apply their own, often more restrictive rules, especially for intelligence-related operational files.
Okay, like a carve-out.
Kind of. It's the CIA saying, yes, we'll look, but don't expect us to reveal state secrets about how we might have trained spy cats. The CIA Information Act gives them more latitude in what they can withhold from their operational files.
Interesting.
So this immediate acceptance, rather than just a refusal or saying no records, subtly implies that the CIA might indeed have records about these highly unusual projects.
They also state their search will be for documents in existence as of and through the date of this acceptance letter. That sounds standard.
It is standard, but it's an important clarification. It means they're not going to create new documents or speculate about future projects. They're looking for what already exists up to that specific date, August 23, 2002.
Sets a clear boundary.
Exactly. It limits their burden, and the requester understands the time limits of the search. It stops them from having to constantly search for new stuff related to the request. Establishes a clear cutoff.
Now, even if your FOIA request gets accepted and the agency says they'll search, there's a practical hurdle many people might overlook. The CIA is very upfront about it here. The cost.
Right, the cost of transparency itself. Accessing government records isn't always free, and this letter lays out the specific fee structure.
It's part of the FOIA process many might not know about, but it's standard procedure for federal agencies.
And one of the most intriguing things here is how the government categorizes FOIA requesters, because that directly impacts the fees they charge.
Okay.
Professor Albert's request falls into the educational and non-commercial scientific institution category.
Which sounds beneficial.
It is. It's a special designation under FOIA that acknowledges the public benefit of academic research. It gives researchers a significant advantage, making it more affordable for them to access government records for scholarly work.
Promoting historical understanding, things like that.
Exactly. This category offers substantial fee reductions compared to, say, commercial requesters.
So what does that mean for him specifically?
It means he'll be required to pay only the cost of reproducing released records.
Just copying costs.
Basically.
Huh.
Compare that to other categories like commercial users, where search fees and review fees can also apply. Those can add up incredibly fast, thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars for complex requests.
Wow.
So for an academic like Professor Albert, getting that waiver for search and review time is a huge benefit. It makes extensive research possible without completely prohibitive costs. It helps democratize access to information.
Ensures money isn't the only barrier to scholarly investigation.
Right. And specifically for him, the cost is 10 cents per page for pages in excess of the first 100, to which you are entitled free.
Okay, so first 100 pages free, then 10 cents a page. Pretty clear.
Very clear. It gives you a tangible sense of the cost. And the letter also plainly states that if the fees look like they'll exceed the $50 site, Professor Albert had already agreed to pay upfront.
They'll let him know.
They'll notify him before incurring more costs. So that outlines the agency's commitment to transparency, even on the money side.
Yeah.
No surprise bills.
Right.
It's a careful balancing act.
Right.
You know, the cost of providing information versus the public's right to access it, designed to be as fair as possible.
So, okay, you've submitted your request, it's accepted, the potential fees, but then comes the waiting game.
Ah, yes. The often frustrating reality of bureaucratic timelines.
The letter says it right there. The heavy volume of FOIA requests received by the agency has created delays in processing.
That's a very common refrain you hear from federal agencies.
Yeah.
It's a practical reality that often bumps up against the sort of aspirational timelines written into the FOIA law itself.
And what is the official timeline?
Well, technically, FOIA mandates a response within 20 working days after acceptance.
20 days. That seems fast for the CIA.
It is. And that's why the letter plainly states the heavy volume has created delays.
Right.
This isn't just a polite excuse. It's a strategic reality for agencies like the CIA.
Right.
They simply cannot respond that quickly, usually, because of the sheer volume and the complexity of the requests they handle.
So it highlights the workload.
Immense workload for the CIA's information release folks and the substantial backlog it creates. It also shows the public's enduring interest in what the government's up to, even stuff from decades ago.
Yeah.
And it's not just pulling a file, right? It often involves huge searches across different systems, maybe talking to other agencies, and meticulous redaction to protect classified info or privacy.
So requesters like Professor Albert just have to wait.
Pretty much. It forces them into a patient waiting game that can stretch for months, sometimes even years, without much legal recourse beyond filing an appeal.
And the letter actually mentions that appeal right. His legal right to consider the delay a denial.
It does. It acknowledges his legal right to consider this delay as a formal denial and immediately appeal to the agency release panel. That's a critical legal tool for FOIA requesters.
So if the agency misses the deadline, it's legally a denial.
Yes, and the requester can then file an administrative appeal, which could eventually lead to suing them in federal court to force the release of records.
Yeah.
It's designed to stop agencies from just ignoring requests forever. It's a legal pressure point for transparency.
But the CIA doesn't exactly encourage that here, do they?
No, they offer a more pragmatic path. They suggest it would be more reasonable to have us continue processing your request and respond as soon as we can.
Right.
This is a typical bureaucratic exchange,
Mm.
balancing the requester's legal rights with the agency's practical processing challenges. The CIA acknowledges his legal standing, but politely suggests a more practical route. Let us work through our backlog, avoid appeals and lawsuits.
It's a way to manage expectations and resources.
Exactly. And their final point: unless we hear from you otherwise, we will assume that you agree, and we will proceed on this basis. That's the standard procedural step.
Okay.
It ensures they can keep working on it without needing more back and forth. Unless the requester explicitly objects to the delay and wants to push the appeal immediately. It's a clever way to keep the request active in their queue without forcing a legal fight right away. Buys them time.
So, okay, let's pull back. What does all this actually mean for us, the curious listener, looking back at this letter from 2002, this seemingly, kind of mundane bureaucratic document? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think the very existence and especially the acceptance of this FOIA request, asking specifically about Acoustic Kitty and other animal spying projects, that lends significant, if maybe indirect, credibility to the idea that these projects were at least thought about, conceptualized, if not actively attempted.
Why do you say that? Why not just deny it if it was totally fake?
Well, think about it. If these were completely fabricated rumors, no basis in reality at all, a simple quick denial, or a clear no records responsive to your request would probably have been more direct.
Less work for them, too.
Less work, definitely less attention-grabbing than accepting a request about spy cats. The fact that they accept it and commit to actually searching for documents strongly suggests there's something to look for.
Oh.
Some potentially relevant records that exist somewhere in their archives, even if those records ultimately turn out to be limited or heavily blacked out, or just records of, say, feasibility studies rather than successful operations.
It validates the inquiry itself. Gives weight to the legend.
Exactly.
And the incredible detail in Professor Albert's questions, asking for lab notes, field experiments, evaluations, that wasn't just random speculation, was it?
Doesn't seem like it. It implies he had some basis for asking these things. He wasn't just, throwing darts in the dark based on vague rumors.
Maybe hints from other documents.
Or sources, perhaps. Maybe hints from previously declassified documents or reliable anecdotal sources, maybe former intelligence folks, or even earlier partial FOIA releases that alluded to these projects. His precision suggests a really well-informed line of questioning.
Not just idle curiosity.
Right. He knew what kind of documentation to ask for, which indicates a deeper understanding of how projects like this would have been organized, funded, and recorded inside a big bureaucratic agency like the CIA. It's almost like he had an internal blueprint for what to look for.
So beyond the kind of intriguing scoop about potential spy cats and birds, this deep dive isn't just about weird animal projects, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the lengths intelligence agencies might go to, especially during intense times like the Cold War, which is where that 1960s date for Acoustic Kitty points us.
Right. An era of high stakes.
Definitely. That era wasn't just about an arms race. It was also a relentless intelligence race. Every possible advantage, no matter how unconventional, was sought to get an edge on the Soviets. It was a time of immense pressure, profound paranoia maybe, where seemingly outlandish ideas could actually gain traction if they offered even a remote chance of success.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, this letter is like a window.
I think it's a fascinating window into the boundless creativity and maybe sometimes desperation involved in intelligence gathering. When the stakes are perceived as that high national security on the line, agencies explore every possible avenue.
Even the really outlandish ones.
Even those. This intersection of, early science, developing technology, and espionage is crucial for understanding intelligence history properly. It highlights a mindset where conventional methods might not feel like enough, leading to truly inventive, sometimes ethically ambiguous experiments.
It reveals a period where the boundaries of what was considered operationally feasible were constantly being pushed.
Absolutely. And it makes you consider the incredible resourcefulness involved in just trying to weaponize or use natural animal abilities for covert operations.
Yeah, because animals, especially ones that blend in like cats or common birds, they offer unique advantages, right?
They do. They can often go unnoticed where a person would stand out. Their movements seem natural, less likely to arouse suspicion.
Yeah.
And they can get into places humans can't.
But the challenge, as we talked about, is control.
Exactly. How do you turn a wild or domesticated animal into a reliable, predictable intelligence asset? This letter hints at the very real, and probably very expensive attempts to try and overcome those fundamental limitations. It underscores this profound curiosity within the intelligence community about what could be done, even if it seemed to defy conventional wisdom.
So ultimately, this single, seemingly dry bureaucratic letter, it's actually pretty powerful.
I think so. Far from being just mundane paperwork, it's a profound testament to the enduring power of the Freedom of Information Act. It's a reminder that even in the most secretive government agencies, there is a legal framework for public access, a crack in the wall of classified information. It demonstrates how FOIA lets citizens, researchers, pull back the curtain, even if it's just a little bit, on government activities. It fosters transparency and allows for historical understanding that might otherwise just be lost or stay secret forever.
It lets us piece together fragments of history.
Exactly. Even if the full picture stays elusive because stuff is still classified, or just because of the passage of time. Without FOIA, documents like this would never see the light of day.
Right.
And our understanding of intelligence history, especially its more unusual and experimental phases, would be far less complete. It's a slow process, often frustrating for requesters, but its undeniable value is in revealing these hidden dimensions of history.
So, from a specific FOIA request about Acoustic Kitty and other potential animal spying projects, to the detailed bureaucratic realities of dealing with the CIA and the very real implications for government transparency, our deep dive today has really taken us into some unexpected corners of intelligence history.
It really has.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most unbelievable stories have this little kernel of truth hidden somewhere, waiting to be found through persistent digging.
And this document, well, yeah, it's not a direct confirmation of project success or even full operational existence. It acts as this fascinating breadcrumb, highlighting the persistent quest for knowledge, for strategic advantage, sometimes in the most unconventional ways you can imagine. It reveals the sheer spectrum of ideas that were considered.
And the diligent efforts of people like Professor Albert to uncover these historical truths, no matter how outlandish they might seem at first glance.
Absolutely. It shows that in the high-stakes world of intelligence, almost no idea is truly off limits for at least some consideration.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If this is what we know or suspect about projects potentially involving cats and dogs and birds, what other truly unconventional methods might have been conceived or even tried that we just haven't uncovered yet through documents like this?
Yeah, what other secrets might still be lurking in those vast, labyrinthine archives of intelligence agencies?
Just waiting for the right FOIA request, right? That precise question to finally bring them into the light.
Could be.
Well, something to ponder the next time you see a cat or a dog or even a crow just, going about their day.
Right.
You never know what's truly under the fur or in the feathers when it comes to the shadowy, imaginative, and sometimes utterly bizarre world of intelligence. Thanks for diving deep with us.